list building, matchups, it's all so different in 11th edition, and I'm going to radically change your perspective because a lot of you are stuck in a 10th edition mindset, and today we're going to get freaking 11th about it. Guys, I'm Doc Crump. I am here to make sure you all become the best possible Warhammer player that you can. I am a professional Warhammer coach, and I'm a top 100 player in the world, fresh coming off of a nice early edition 5-0 victory, which was super, super fun. And I'm really, really excited to be bringing this value to you so that you can become the best possible players that you can. So what we're talking about today is the dispositions versus the army matchups. So a lot of people are stuck in a 10th edition mindset when they're in list construction. What they're doing is they are trying to stay, oh, how does my army X play into army Y? But I'm here to tell you, maybe don't throw that in the dumpster, but put in the recycling bin for right now. We might need to get a few things out of that, but we're going to get rid of most of it. So I'm going to make an argument for you guys today why I think actually take and hold is going to be the strongest disposition, and why if you're focusing on the dispositions by themselves, you're going to be in a marvelous place in this edition. So I got some data backed up from the recent ATC massive teams tournament that was out there and a couple of the individual singles tournaments that have been coming out. So I'm really excited to share all of this stuff with you. So just a quick overview of why take and hold is really the strongest is most similar to 10th. It requires 0 action monkeys. It counters purge. You can read that. I want to go through the whole presentation, and I just wanted to preview the information here for you guys, and then I'm going to come back to it at the end, and we'll wrap it all together. Okay, so here we go, guys. The first big data set from the ATC tournament, which was a 36-man, 8-man teams tournament, is officially out, and we have a crazy amount of data coming from there, which is really backing up a lot of the predictions that I've made and some of the assumptions that I'm making, although I've had to change a few of them based off of some of the data that's come out. So if you guys don't know, 8-man teams, we're not talking really about teams today. We're actually applying it to our singles mindset, but for just so you all understand, when there's an 8-man teams in 11th edition, you can maximally have 2 dispositions represented on the team, and you have to represent every disposition. Now, out of all the dispositions for these 36 teams, 97% of the teams took double purge, which tells you something. There's a lot of freaking purge in the meta right now. Now, my prediction, which is that dispositions, not the army, is going to be determining who's going to be winning a lot more than, oh, does Tau beat T-Suns, or does T-Suns beat Blood Angels? I really think it's going to be the disposition is going to be the deciding factor, much more importantly than the armies. This is not to say that armies are completely useless when it determines the matchup strength, but I want you guys to be mastering the disposition. And what I've been telling all of my clients, and what's been paying off pretty good so far, and what I've been practicing myself, which has also been paying off pretty good so far, is that if you can master one disposition, I'd almost be comfortable with you jumping from army to army in this edition. 10th edition, I told people to stick with one army, focus, and crush it. But the scoring is all about our dispositions now. We actually create a game plan differently in 11th edition than we did in 10th edition. In 10th edition, we took the unique tactics and strategies available to our army to play the mission. Now in 11th edition, it's not that simple because we have to play our mission, but we also have to be able to counteract a different mission for our opponents. Because in 10th edition, our mission was our opponent's mission, so it became really easy to build this game plan. It gets a little bit different in 11th. So that's why I really want you guys mastering dispositions. If you want to play take and hold, I'm a take and hold player for right now. This could change as the edition develops. Then make sure you play take and hold. If you get the itch and you want to switch from orcs to blood angels, no problem, but switch to a take and hold so that you continuously master this disposition so that you can learn to play the other ones. So let's get into some cool data for you guys. I think you're going to really, really enjoy some of this stuff. So, here, let's go to this one, and then I'll go back to that one. Okay. Disposition really is going to be the king here. Your matchup isn't necessarily irrelevant, but we're going to focus on dispositions first. So if we look at this data, this is all from the ATC team tournament. Let me make this a little bit bigger so it's easier for you guys to see on your screen. When we're looking at this, we see out of all the games that were played, 271 purge games, 237 hold games, 243 priority games. Purge into purge, obviously there was a 50% win rate, okay? But purge going into take and hold only had a 48% win rate, which means take and hold had a 2% edge over purge over the course of the incredible amount of games that were played at this team's tournament. Purge also had a slight disadvantage into priority assets on average. Very interesting. It had an overwhelming advantage into recon and disruption. When we go through the rest of the numbers, take and hold has a 52% win rate against purge, meaning they have the advantage. It's obviously 50-50 into hold, a 53% advantage over priority, 50% into recon, and a 42% into disruption. Now this I find very interesting, and I'm gonna stack this with some data from my tournament that I went to and some of the other singles tournaments. But I think this is probably reflective of low data set. And remember, all of this is low data set. So some of these stats will be skewed just by the fact that we haven't had that many games yet in the new edition of 40K. So just keep in mind that all of this is lower data set. And as we get more and more data, this might shift a little bit. But when we're looking at this, what we can actually see is that take and hold and priority assets seem to have the most even keel win rate across the field. Now, Purge, while definitely having the highest win rate, is weaker into both hold and priority assets. And so its hold and priority assets are countering Purge. That's a really big deal because what we also saw over the weekend's data was that when you take every single tournament that was done last weekend, 54% of the field was actually Purge the Foe. So when we're planning our dispositions, we actually have to plan to play into Purge the Foe. And it's actually the most important thing that we have to plan for playing into. So if you can take a take and hold or a priority assets where you actually have an innate advantage against Purge the Foe, that's going to feel really, really good as you are trying to crush your opponents on the battlefield. Okay. Now, when we look at recon and disruption, they were actually a very small percentage of the battlefield in singles. In teams, due to the nature of they were forced to bring a recon and a disruption. They were more highly represented, but Purge obviously crushes them. Overall, when we look at all of it, Purge the Foe had a 54% overall win rate, Take and Hold had a 51% win rate, and Priority had a 50% win rate. Now, the cool thing is that even though Priority and Hold were a lower total win rate over Purge the Foe, they had a higher win rate into Purge the Foe. So let me give you a little bit of my thought process here. When I planned my army for our GT, which I went 5-0 in, I built a Take and Hold army specifically designed to counter Purge the Foe armies that were designed to counter Purge the Foe armies. So let me say that again, just to make sure that everyone can grasp this one. Since Purge the Foe is such a huge percentage of the battlefield, good Purge the Foe players are having to make sure that they account for the Purge the Foe mirror. The name of that mission would be Meat Grinder. So we have Meat Grinder style Purge the Foe list. These Purge the Foe lists are going to be lower unit count, more durable, more hard-hitting style armies. So I built my Take and Hold army to counter that style Purge the Foe army, and it worked out really, 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 really well. So it's one of the reasons why I believe that Take and Hold actually has a significant advantage in the meta right now, even though its overall win rate might be lower than Purge's, since it's got such a good win rate since it's got such a potential for an advantage over Purge the Foe, and Purge the Foe is the vast majority of the field. I think even though its overall win rate is a little bit lower, it leads you to being able to win more overall if you're taking it in a skilled player. Now, of course, in teams, when we looked at it and we see the 42% loss into disruption, I believe this is accounted for just by low data set, because when we look at a lot of the aggregate data from a lot of our singles tournaments, this was like close to 10%, a 60% win rate into disruption. So I think this is skewed. Could be mistaken. As we get more data, this will, of course, get more fleshed out. Now, I want to point out here, this doesn't mean that our matchups for army into army is actually pointless. Now, I know I said that to be a little flippant and just to get people's attention, but the reality is, actually, interestingly right now, Tau Empire has a 75% win rate into Votann. Now, look at the amount of games scored. This is only 6 games over the course of the ATC. This is a very, very small percentage of games, so this data can wildly be skewed. But it does interesting when we look at the average score of a 14.5 into a 5.5. Now, what this means, because some of you might be a little confused by this, in teams scoring, they work on a 20-point scoring percentage. So every 5-point discrepancy will allow 1 game point, for example. So if you win a game 56-50, it would become an 11-9 victory. If you win a game 61 to, I'm sorry, I guess it would be 56-49. Pardon. So if you win a game 61 to, what would that be, 40, that would be a 12-8 victory, right? So that's how this average score discrepancy works when you're talking about teams, and that's why it can be a little confusing because we're taking team data right here. But it was a 14.5 into a 5.5, which is an overwhelming, massive victory. This means that the average Tau player is winning by over 20-point victory point differential into your Votann. Thousand Suns had a massive win percentage against Death Guard. Votann had a massive win percentage into CSM, Tyranids into Space Marines, Tau into Demons, Necrons into Thousand Suns, Necrons into Demons, Orcs into Demons. Interesting data here. So matchup isn't completely irrelevant, but if we focus on our purge or our disposition matchup before the actual army matchup, you're going to get much further. This is the prediction I'm making, and it seems to be paying off so far. So let's talk a little bit about some of these things, because I can already hear and feel some of the people who are in the chat. They're like, disruption sucks, it's unfair, GW sucks at making games. No, GW is actually amazing at making games, which is why this is the most popular tabletop competitive game in the entire world. It's not all doom and gloom. Even though initial results look like Purge is overwhelmingly powerful, there's a few details that I think people just really aren't grasping yet. It's super early in the edition, and there's a lot of things to build off of. Not all dispositions have the same ease of scoring. It's very clear that Purge scores more easily than basically any other detachment or disposition. Gosh. However, you can take other things in the game into account. So, for example, one of the theories I'm currently operating off of is Subterranean Assault, which is a Tyranid detachment and is a disruption detachment. If you build that not necessarily to play to score disruption, but you build it with a killing mindset, if you look at the maps, there are 3 maps for every single disposition matchup. So if we have the disruption maps into the purge the foe maps, what you see is that these maps are very, very friendly to disruption players, and they're very, very unfriendly into most purge players. The problem is that Purge just annihilates disruption when it comes to scoring. But if we build an army, and this is a theory, granted, this is a theory, but if we build an army that is not necessarily designed to really be too concerned about scoring our disruption and is much more concerned about tabling our opponents and then scoring the points later in the game, something like a Subterranean Assault will be able to crush most of the Purge the foe armies that are out there, because they're on those maps. If you go look at them, there is literally nowhere for them to stage anywhere from an army as killy as Subterranean Assault could potentially be. You can extrapolate this to other disruption armies that have potential to deal incredible damage. If you focus on actually murdering your opponents and then scoring afterwards, my current theory is that this is actually going to work really, really, really well. I just want to give you guys like a little bit of an insight into how I'm thinking. This is not backed up by data yet. We need a lot more data to be able to back it up, but this is how I'm actually thinking. Because you have such an overwhelming map advantage in a killing perspective, I believe that is going to be the case. So there is more complexities to this disposition matchup than just the scoring. Just hang your hat on that for right now while you're trying to figure out how to deal with the overwhelming amount of purge players in the field. If you're a disruption player, first off, you're taking the harder road. It just is what it is. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But you might have a different avenue towards victory, especially when we note that most Purge players are going to be built for the Purge Mirror, which is going to require low unit count, tough to kill units. If you make a exceptionally nuke-heavy disruption army, you might have a big advantage, assuming that you build for the maps that you're going to be playing on. So it gets more complicated than just scoring, but there is obviously a favored scoring advantage there. So let's wrap this all up, because we went through all the data here. I'm going to give you why I think Take and Hold is actually the strongest of all of the dispositions for right now, and why I really, really, really recommend that you might, if you're starting to feel a little bit overwhelmed by all the new information and new choices for 11th edition, if you just stick with Take and Hold for right now, it might really improve you. This is what I'm doing. It is by far the most similar scoring to what we had in 10th edition. So when I start this edition, even me, this is my job, guys. I'm a little bit overwhelmed by how much new rules and how much new stuff. I don't need to be focusing on even more new stuff if I can help it. So I'm going to make the scoring as similar as possible to 10th edition so that I can at least hang my hat on that and focus on a lot more of the actual newer stuff. It requires 0 action monkeys. If we look at your Take and Hold, you're going to have 0, and I mean 0 actions that must be accomplished. The only actions you'll ever need to do are from the secondary deck, and from the secondary deck, there's only 2 actions that need to be done, and that's Plunder and Cleanse. A Take and Hold army will naturally be able to do Cleanse, and you're never going to do Plunder anyway, because it's incredibly hard to accomplish, unless you're like a Disruption army or something. So I don't need a single action monkey, which means I no longer need 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 units in an army. I can build a very legit, incredibly impressive Take and Hold army with 9 units, which is very, very big. Take and Hold counters Purge. When you look at the minimum viable score minimal scores that people will do in the Take and Hold versus the Purge matchup. This is the unstoppable force versus the immovable object matchup. What I did is I went and I made up a sheet and I took all of the gimme points. So what are all the points that you're automatically going to be scoring as a take and hold player? What are all the points you're automatically going to be scoring as a Purge the Foe player? And when you compare them, the ones that don't take really risk to accomplish, take and hold actually ends up scoring 2 primary points more than Purge the Foe. What this means is that Purge the Foe players on average are going to be forced to impose their will on the battlefield first because they're going to have to interrupt the fact that the take and hold player has a natural scoring advantage over them, which means that if you have a take and hold army that is designed to allow them to push into you and then collapse upon them and overwhelm them, that gives you a big, big play advantage. And from my experience in playing in the tournament so far, dang, has this been absolutely real. So we've got very strong play countering recon and disruption. Interestingly enough, the data from the ATC did not back this up. This is a big surprise to me. I'm going to go with my opinion here because we do still have such a low data set, but I do recognize that that data might be a little bit counter to what I think right here. But when we look at singles data, Take and Hold seems to be doing really, really well into Recon and Disruption. And just as an example of why Take and Hold might be so good into something like Recon, if you look at the matchup into Recon, if you're playing any Space Marine field and you have a unit of Infiltrators, Recon basically automatically loses because they have to be scoring Take and Hold in 4 quarters to get the 6 victory points that they need in that matchup, which becomes almost impossible once you have a unit of Infiltrators on the battlefield. Just that one unit kind of shuts it down. Now, currently I'm playing Take and Hold as Orcs, so I don't have access to Infiltrators, but I do have enough units to make it so you can't really deep strike anywhere you want. And if you do, I'm just going to roll Tide straight through you anyway. It is slightly unfavored into priority assets. As a Take and Hold player, you're going to be seeing a slightly unfavored points scoring into your priority assets, but this can be counteracted by good play. So if you look at this, you are going to lose pretty hard unless you contest the center objective against priority assets. And because of that mission, what happens is your priority assets will be scoring for holding 3 or more objectives, and you as the take and hold player are going to be scoring by holding more objectives. So you really have to counteract them. Since there's 4 objectives in the middle line, it's very easy for them to score 3 objectives. It's very hard for you to score more. So you really need to be contesting the objectives. But once you play correctly, it makes sure that the points differential is much less. And then lastly, as a take and hold player, what we can do is we can build an army that is a kill, kill, kill army without needing to kill. So point of order. So the Orcs list that I recently went undefeated with, it was designed to table my opponent, but it was designed to force my opponent to hit me first. Because being a take and hold player, I can just sit on my objectives and score points. My Purge the Foe opponents are going to have to push into my lines, which then allows me to kill the relevant stuff with my relevant stuff first, because they have to expose themselves. I don't have to expose myself, making ample use of things like the hidden and the gone to ground rules. So these are the reasons why I personally think that take and hold is the strongest way to play, even if it's not going to be the most popular way to play. So win rate percentage, you're probably going to see it behind Purge the Foe, as I demonstrated early. But if you're trying to optimize your performance, I'm going to definitely go ahead and say that take and hold is the best way to play. Lowest barrier to entry, decreases the amount of mental fatigue upon you when you're going into other matchups, and it's got really strong play into all the freaking matchups with a slight disadvantage into priority assets that is largely eliminated when you play the matchup correctly. So let me know what you guys think. What is your favorite disposition right now? And do you think that this is a really unbalanced system, or do you think it's really balanced? For me personally, I think it's incredibly balanced, and it's a great way for GW to add another layer where they can also balance other unfair mechanisms in the game. So with that, I'm going to take off. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Crump on. Bye-bye.